Created by Tony Basgalup for Apple TV Plus, and with visionary horror director M. Night Shyamalan as an executive producer and director, psychological horror thriller series Servant creeps up on you until it completely engulfs you in its familial horror tale. The series packs witches, cultist intrigue, and a dead baby joke. The joke's on us, the viewers, to keep the story pacing towards a potentially dreadful finale. While the final episode of the third season, Mama, does not end the story, it keeps us jittery with the final cliffhanger. If those scenes are bugging you, let us go to the bottom of the ending. Season 3 finale recap. New tenants arrive at 2119 Spruce Street, just across the Turner house. The man looks intently at the Turner house, where the infestation of Aunt Josephine's body has led to widespread contamination of the house. After the fallout of the previous episode, Dorothy tries to fill in the 2 missing weeks from the past year in Jericho's baby book. She keeps the dread alive while maintaining a semblance of amicability towards Leanne and the family. Sean brings out a lavish breakfast platter for Dorothy, while Julian volunteers to make some juice. Probably since Leanne snatched Jericho away from Dorothy in the previous episode, Dorothy touches Jericho for the first time at the breakfast table. Sean and Julian both agree that Dorothy's father, Frank Pierce, is not welcome at the house without Dorothy's permission. Leanne reasserts that she has forgiven Dorothy, which would enrage anyone in Dorothy's shoes. However, Dorothy agrees to make amends and initiate a new beginning for the time. Later, of course, Uncle George reappears on the streets in the neighborhood, telling a confused Roscoe about a nearing end. Meanwhile, increasingly paranoid, Sean tells Julian that something evil is at play. They conclude that Dorothy may be up to something. Even after a nightly dose of trazodone, Dorothy shows signs of distress. She apologizes a lot, and when Sean confronts her, she states that she is just being agreeable. At the same time, Dorothy cannot forget Dr. Mackenzie's accusation of her being a threat to Jericho. Leanne takes Dorothy out on a walk, hoping for a proper introduction between Dorothy and her cult. They have also found a leaflet, doubling as a peace treaty, which contains a job offering for 11 News as their morning anchor. While Dorothy is unsure of applying for the job, she is sure to open her mother's 1978 Romani Conti and do away with the memories. But she is also confident of acts that would lead to ruins, such as leaving the house with Jericho in the dead of night. When Leanne and the boys intervene, things go south. Does Dorothy die? Does Leanne have anything to do with the fall? At the end of the tense finale, Dorothy falls from the railing of the stairs. To give you a quick recap, Leanne is the one who finds Dorothy sneaking out of the room. Leanne naively asks whether she can come along on the trip, upon which Dorothy unleashes her hatred. She assures Leanne, much like in the previous season, that she is neither her mother nor her friend. The relationship between Dorothy and Leanne is supposed to be one of boss and servant, which brings back in mind the show's title. However, Sean, who has a sense of the powers of Leanne, asks Leanne in a previous scene not to hurt Dorothy. Leanne thinks of Dorothy as her mother, and she is offended to hear Sean's concerns. As Leanne retreats to her room dismissing Sean, a photo on the wall ominously drops on the cupboard underneath. Coming back to the fall, Leanne apologizes to Dorothy right before Dorothy slips. The railing breaks, weakened by the infestation, causing Dorothy to fall on the ground floor. Leanne also convincingly takes Jericho away from Dorothy's lap to avert another death of the miracle baby. Despite Leanne agreeing not to harm Dorothy, we know that Leanne cannot always control her anger, much like Dorothy. Anger, after all, is one of the most passionate emotions. Rage leads Leanne to burn her home, and Dorothy almost to bury Leanne alive. Therefore, much like the infestation, Leanne's forces seem to be at work when we reflect upon the fall. However, Dorothy is still alive by the end of the episode, and we hope that she can make it back in a possible 4th season. But Dorothy seems to land on her head, decreasing her chance of survival. If she overcomes a near-death experience herself, maybe Dorothy can change her outlook towards the world. The show keeps the viewers rooting for another season with the massive cliffhanger. What does the infestation mean? We have seen infestation around the house throughout the season in the kitchen cabinets, in the chimney, in the wine cellar, and now in the house's wooden structure. Seemingly, the infestation took root from the rotting body of Aunt Josephine and spread around the house. In a state of delirium, Uncle George asks Roscoe whether he can smell the pungent smell coming out of the house. We see that the infestation leads to the railing being torn apart, which causes Dorothy's fall. The infestation is a popular horror trope used in numerous genre forays. Most often, they reveal the protagonist's decaying state of mind. Infestation arises from lack of care, which mirrors the air of secrecy in the Turner household. It is a family where people cannot trust each other. Even Sean, the most faithful in the house, finds it difficult to trust. He cannot trust Leanne now, while his trust in Dorothy received a blow when she went out to stop the car alarm. The motif of infestation may become more prominent in the coming season. We may even see the Turners leaving the house and the neighborhood to escape the maggots, both literal and figurative. Does Dorothy forgive Leanne? Episode 10 of Servant Season 3 starts this finale with Dorothy waking up in bed alone. Without Jericho strapped to her chest anymore, Dorothy feels like a shell of the confident woman we saw earlier in the season. She's silent as she approaches the kitchen, as everyone fusses over her, encouraging the frazzled woman to eat her breakfast. Leanne speaks up and points out that she wants to help, urging Dorothy to stop fighting her and to start fresh. She forgives Dorothy and always will for trying to send her away. Dorothy smiles weakly and promises not to go against Leanne again. And so, the fresh start sees Leanne and Dorothy getting along like a house on fire. Julian knows his sister though and doesn't buy her act. He talks to Sean about this and even confronts Dorothy after, believing she's up to something and trying to work out what. Dorothy refuses to let him in on it though, while Leanne continues to act in her usual creepy way. What is Dorothy offered? Leanne sneaks in the space behind her room to the dead body, which simply turns to dust and fades away. As it does, she collects up the remains and throws it in the bin outside. However, Leanne soon learns from one of her informants that Milo, one of the squatters, has gone missing, and no one seems to know where he is. One of the recurring motifs this season has been maggots, and this visually references the rot that's infiltrated Dorothy's mind, growing ever more obvious as the episodes have progressed. In the morning, Leanne takes Dorothy out into the middle of the park, where all the squatters gather. Surrounded, she hands over a slip of paper that offers up a lucrative position for Dorothy's career. 11 News are looking for a new reporter, and this could be the dream job she's been after. It would also allow her to get a better work-life balance with Jericho. What is Jericho's first word? Who's he looking at? That night, Jericho says his first word, Mama. Only, he's not looking at Dorothy when he says it, he seems to be looking at someone in the hallway. When Dorothy looks though, there's no one there. It's subtly hinted that Jericho could be looking at Leanne. We don't actually receive an answer for this, but given what we've learned this year, as well as the influence Leanne has on the family, it makes sense. After drinking some alcohol over dinner, something Julian isn't happy with given his prior addiction, Dorothy speaks to Sean in private. She's no longer upset with her husband and has made peace with what's happened. She apologizes for her anger and pent-up frustrations, kissing him and promising to be by his side. Outside, Uncle George shows up and claims that things are decaying, the house is filled with parasites. He can smell the rot coming from the house, and believes that whatever is inside is growing stronger. Apparently, the end is nigh. How does Servant Season 3 end? Back inside, Dorothy waits until Sean is asleep and sneaks out to where she has a whole bag all made up and ready to go. Julian was right, she does have a plan. She scoops up Jericho along with her bag and tries to leave. After giving him his pacifier, Leanne appears on the stairs. After trying to talk Dorothy out of this, Leanne screams for Julian and Sean to help. Only, there's a problem. The rot on the stairs has grown too much, and as Leanne apologizes to Dorothy, she slips backwards, tumbling down the stairs and landing in a heap on the ground. Just before she falls, Leanne scoops up Jericho and watches Dorothy's lifeless body as blood oozes out from her. So Servant bows out its final episode with a surprisingly subdued episode, one that doesn't quite have the same aplomb or shock factor that the two previous seasons had in abundance. Instead, everything just sorta ends with Dorothy's life hanging in the balance. Given how integral she's been to this story though, I can't imagine the scriptwriters have actually killed her off, and I bet she's probably still alive but potentially confined to a wheelchair or the hospital for the time being. Beyond that, there's some chatter about the end and evil itself, courtesy of a cameo from Uncle George, but there really hasn't been a whole lot else to really sink your teeth into. I said last week that the story could have been told in 6 episodes, and I stand by that after seeing this finale. The show has felt completely meandering and rip-feeding its story for absolutely no reason. Unfortunately, this hasn't been a season to remember, slipping into the usual applet of issues by spreading out a story that could have been told in a much shorter time frame. Despite that though, fans of this show will undoubtedly be eager to find out what happens in season 4.